Hello and welcome to today's GSA Regional Spotlight webinar on Asia Pacific. In the next 30 minutes or so, our research team will take a look at the evolution of public and private networks in the region. The on-demand recording of this session will be shared with you immediately following the event, and you can also download the presentation at any point by moving your mouse over the screen and clicking on the download icon. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. The presentation will last about 15 minutes, so please do submit your questions using the Q&A chat box as we go along, and the team will answer as many as we can at the end. You can also download the report that lies behind today's headline figures from the GSA website, and again, we will share that link with you immediately after the event. But first, a very quick recap intro to GSA for those of you who are not overly familiar with us. Established back in '98 to be the voice of the mobile ecosystem. We've now got almost 100 members and associates, and the work of the GSA includes both gathering and sharing data insights, which you'll hear today, and industry advocacy. GSA has got working groups, including private mobile networks, RedCap, fixed wireless access. Fixed wireless access forum has about 57 members, representing roughly 80% of the infrastructure, chipset, module, and CPA value chain for FWE. And GSA Spectrum Group also does a lot of work covering high band, mid band, and low band spectrum. In parallel to the working groups, GSA publishes reports based on data from all 7 of the Gambos databases. Now, these unique databases can be accessed by all employees of every GSA member and associate organization via the GSA website. You simply use your business email address and you can get straight in if your company is a member or an associate. So if you are, I would encourage you to check out that on the website if you've not already. These databases track over 2,500 operators, over 600 public 5G networks globally. So again, a whole raft of data there, which you can dig in, research, create your own charts, and download data sets to support you in your work. But today, we're really focusing on the Asia Pacific region. And with that, I'll hand you over to Jordan from our research team to take us through the data.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Richard. And good morning or good afternoon to everybody joining this session. As Richard mentioned, I'm Jordan Cox and I'm part of the research team here at the GSA, and I help lead several of our research projects as well as contribute to our online database, Gambod. So today's presentation draws on insights from a number of recent GSA reports, including the most up-to-date edition of our regional spotlight on Asia Pacific that Richard has just mentioned, with data current to August 2025. It also incorporates findings from our public networks and operators report, 5G market snapshot report, private mobile networks, and satellite NTN reports, among a few others as well. And within this session, we'll be walking through a snapshot of the Asia Pacific region, which is one of the most diverse and dynamic markets for mobile technology globally. And specifically, we'll look at LTE and 5G network deployments, spectrum activity, private mobile networks, satellite connectivity, and the ongoing 2G and 3G shutdowns. And this focus on APAC is part of our wider effort to provide region-specific intelligence, following from our earlier spotlights on Latin America, Europe, and Africa. And these regional reports are helping to build a more detailed global picture of mobile market evolution. And so now let's turn our attention to the ongoing shutdown of legacy networks, specifically 2G and 3G, which is a key trend that continues to reshape the mobile landscape both globally and in the Asia Pacific region. And as of August 2025, 278 switch-offs across 83 countries have either completed, are currently underway, or are planned globally. And this marks a significant acceleration from just last year. And so zooming in on Asia Pacific specifically, the region continues to make solid progress in retiring older network infrastructure in favor of more spectrum efficient LTE and 5G technologies. Currently, the GSA has tracked 34 operators across 14 countries in the region that have now completed their switch-offs. and an additional 21 operators in 11 countries have announced plans to do so as well in the near future. We have seen some notable milestones here recently. For instance, Telstra in Australia, SoftBank in Japan, and M1 in Singapore have all shut down either 2G or 3G services across the last year. And so looking ahead, we are expecting more first-time switch-offs to occur across the region. Grameenphone in Bangladesh, Jazz in Pakistan, and DTAC in Thailand are examples of operators planning 2G and 3G switch-offs across the rest of 2025 and into 2026. And the map on the right side of this slide highlights this progress visually. And as consumer demand continues to shift toward data-heavy services, and as device penetration for 4G and particularly 5G continues to grow, these shutdowns will only accelerate. And we do anticipate a wave of additional switch-offs over the next 2 to 5 years, in particular, in markets that are now reaching maturity in their 4G and early 5G deployments. So now let's take a dive into our first set of network investment figures, starting with LTE, both globally and within the Asia-Pacific region. And as the data on this slide makes clear, LTE has firmly peaked in terms of mobile network operator launches. And as of the end of July 2025, 174 operators across 52 countries in Asia-Pacific are still investing in LTE. And of those, 150 operators in 51 countries have already launched LTE networks. And that means the vast majority of investment now reflects ongoing maintenance or evolution of existing networks rather than brand new rollouts. And at the same time, the number of new LTE deployments is rapidly declining. Only 24 operators in 14 countries are currently in the process of deploying or testing LTE, and just 15 operators in 10 countries are planning launches, which of course is a clear sign of market saturation. Though this trend isn't just limited to Asia Pacific, globally, LTE growth has slowed sharply. And just for comparison, in 2015, we saw the peak for LTE with over 120 net new launches, which fast forward to now, in 2025, the GSA has tracked only 7 new LTE launches so far this year. And this drop-off highlights how operators are shifting their strategic focus and capital expenditure away from LTE and toward 5G and beyond. But returning to APAC, the pattern is even more pronounced in mature markets like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Singapore, where LTE is now largely viewed as a fallback layer for 5G coverage. And in many of these countries, we are also seeing LTE spectrum being refarmed for 5G use, further signaling the transition. And the shift is driven by multiple market forces, most notably the increasing availability of affordable 5G devices, growth in subscriber uptake, and the lower per bit cost and energy efficiency of 5G networks for operators. And so now let's quickly turn our attention to LTE-Advanced, which is sometimes referred to as 4.5G. And this brought with it a range of enhancements over standard LTE, including much higher data rates, greater capacity, lower latency, and the flexibility of backward compatibility with LTE where needed. And globally, LTE-Advanced saw widespread uptake prior to the launch of commercial 5G, serving as an important stepping stone in the mobile technology evolution. And as of July 2025, the GSA has tracked 82 operators in 29 countries in Asia-Pacific investing in LTE-Advanced or LTE-Advanced Pro. And of these, 76 operators have launched services, showing that most investments have translated into commercial offerings. And at this stage, only 3 operators are still in the process of deploying or testing the technology, and just 4 operators in 3 countries are planning future launches. And this drop-off in deployment interest clearly reflects the broader shift toward 5G, which offers even more advanced capabilities. And if we zoom out for a global comparison, over 400 operators in 167 countries have invested in LTE-Advanced, with 360 having launched services. So Asia Pacific makes up a significant portion of global adoption, with markets in the region like South Korea, China, and again, Australia, being among the earliest to adopt LTE-Advanced. And in many cases, those deployments laid the groundwork for their strong 5G performance that we are seeing today. However, the outlook for LTE-Advanced and LTE as a whole in APAC is clearly tapering off. Only a handful of operators still plan launches, and this confirms that LTE-Advanced has matured and now largely serves as a supporting layer as 5G adoption expands. So now let's explore LTE's successor, 5G, which continues to gain significant traction globally and across the Asia-Pacific region. And as of the end of July 2025, the GSA has identified 633 operators in 188 countries globally that are investing in 5G networks. And this includes both mobile and fixed wireless access deployments. And it's a strong indication of how 5G has become the cornerstone of global mobile infrastructure. Importantly, Asia Pacific represents 18% of these global 5G investments. This share reflects the region's diversity, ranging from early adopters like South Korea and China to emerging players that are just beginning their 5G journeys. And when it comes to live commercial networks, the GSA has recorded 354 operators in 133 countries globally that have launched 5G services. And within this, Asia Pacific contributes around 20% of these commercial launches. And so whilst APAC accounts for 18% of investment, it's slightly ahead in terms of actual network launches, which is of course encouraging for the region. And beyond the networks that are already live, the pipeline is still active. 7 operators in 7 different countries across the region are currently deploying 5G. And another 17 operators in 8 countries have announced plans to launch, which suggests continued near and mid-term expansion of 5G. Now, much of this momentum is being driven by increasing spectrum availability, more affordable 5G handsets, and growing demand for low latency, high throughput use cases, from video streaming to enterprise automation. We are also seeing interesting regional variation. For example, South Korea remains a global leader in terms of network performance and subscriber penetration. India has moved rapidly in the past year, with its operators such as Reliance Jio and Bharti Airtel rolling out wide-scale 5G networks across urban and rural areas. However, in contrast, Pacific Island nations and some Southeast Asian markets are using 5G selectively, often for fixed wireless access to extend broadband access where fibre isn't viable in their rural and non-urban populations. And so overall, the 5G landscape in Asia Pacific is one of active growth, diverse implementation strategies, and continued investment, all of which we expect to accelerate as we head into 2026. So now let's take a closer look at 5G Standalone, often referred to as the next evolution of 5G networks, which, unlike non-standalone 5G, which still relies on 4G LTE core, 5G Standalone is built on an entirely new core architecture, enabling the full benefits of 5G to be realized. And these benefits include lower latency, higher reliability, better support for network slicing, stronger indoor coverage, and more advanced security features. However, despite these advantages, 5G Standalone adoption globally is still emerging, in part because many non-standalone networks continue to deliver strong performance and are quicker to deploy. So to give you the global picture, as of July 2025, the GSA has tracked 163 operators in 65 countries investing in 5G Standalone. And of these, 73 operators in 39 countries have launched commercial 5G Standalone services. So now when we zoom in on Asia Pacific, the region stands out as a real hotspot for standalone activity. And as of the end of July 2025, 48 operators in 17 countries across APAC are investing in 5G Standalone. That's nearly 30% of all standalone investors globally. 27 operators in 11 countries have launched 5G Standalone networks. Again, a strong showing from the region in comparison to other regions globally. And 11 operators in 7 countries and territories are currently testing the technology, which points to continued momentum in the near term. And Asia Pacific includes some of the world's earliest and most advanced adopters of standalone technology. And these include China's three largest operators, China Mobile, China Telecom, and China Unicom, all of whom have deployed nationwide 5G standalone networks. Telstra in Australia, which has been a vocal advocate for standalone as a foundation for future enterprise use cases. And Globe Telecom in the Philippines, which has launched 5G standalone with an eye towards smart city and enterprise services. And meanwhile, operators like Cellcard in Cambodia and Spark in New Zealand are actively testing standalone, signaling more commercial launches to come over the short and medium term. And as operators in APAC explore network slicing, private 5G, and ultra-reliable low-latency communications, the foundational role of 5G standalone will become even more critical. And so in short, Asia-Pacific isn't just participating in the global standalone trend, it's helping to lead it. So now let's turn our attention to private mobile networks, which continue to see growing traction as enterprises seek greater control, performance, and security in their wireless connectivity. And as of July 2025, the GSA has identified over 50 vendors involved in supplying equipment for LTE or 5G-based private networks, and more than 66 mobile network operators globally that are actively participating in private mobile network projects, whether that be as service providers, partners, or infrastructure enablers. And in total, the GSA has identified 1,772 customer deployments that have been identified as deploying private mobile networks in 80 countries. And of these, 461 deployments are linked to named organizations and 1,314 deployments are anonymized in industries such as defense and public utilities. And what's driving this momentum is the broadening range of industry use cases, from smart manufacturing and logistics hubs to airports, ports, and utility infrastructure. Organizations are turning to private networks for dedicated high-performance connectivity in environments where public mobile or Wi-Fi might not meet the reliability or security requirements. And so looking at Asia Pacific, we now count 360 unique customer references, which makes up around 20% of the global total. And key markets leading the way include Australia, particularly in mining and critical infrastructure, China and Japan with strong uptake in manufacturing and industrial automation, and other growing contributors like India, South Korea, and Thailand, where smart city and enterprise innovation is driving new demand. We are also seeing an increase in commercially available pre-integrated private network solutions, which is helping to reduce deployment complexity and accelerate adoption, especially for smaller scale use cases or pilot deployments. And so overall, private mobile networks have gone global, and Asia Pacific continues to play a key role in shaping how and where they are deployed. So now taking a deeper look at private mobile networks, and in particular vertical adoption, specifically in Asia Pacific, we see a trend that aligns closely with global patterns, but also highlights some regional strengths. And as of July 2025, manufacturing is by far the strongest sector for private mobile networks in Asia Pacific, with 87 customer deployments. And this dominance is no surprise given the scale and complexity of manufacturing operations in countries like China, Japan, India, and South Korea, where automation, robotics, and real-time monitoring are increasingly standard. And these use cases demand the low latency, high reliability, and secure data environments that private LTE and 5G networks are well suited to deliver. And following manufacturing, the next most active sector is mining, with 37 deployments, an area where Australia and China in particular are leading. In remote and often hazardous environments like mines, the ability to run autonomous vehicles, drones, and connected sensors on a dedicated mobile network has become a compelling value proposition. And other sectors also seeing traction within the region include device testing and lab as a service, with 23 deployments, education with 21 deployments, typically university campuses, research institutes, or technical colleges deploying 5G networks for experimental and training purposes, and an additional 20 deployments in other sectors, which may include energy, transportation, and logistics. And so this growing diversity of use cases is encouraging, and it shows that private mobile networks are not just an enterprise trend, but a broader platform for innovation across verticals. And it's also worth noting that the mix of LTE and 5G varies by sector. For example, mining often leans on LTE due to its proven stability, whereas manufacturing and lab environments are increasingly trialing 5G, especially where latency sensitive applications are involved. And so finally, we'll turn our attention to spectrum activity, which of course is an essential building block for mobile network deployment and evolution, including both public and private networks. And since the start of 2022, the Asia Pacific region has seen a flurry of auctions and allocations, with major spectrum events completed across at least 8 countries. And these include Australia, Bangladesh, India, Malaysia, New Zealand, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. And the frequencies allocated have ranged from sub-1 gigahertz bands like 800 megahertz, which are ideal for wide area coverage, to mid-band spectrum around 3.5 gigahertz, which is central to 5G performance, offering a balance of speed and coverage. But what's particularly interesting is the variation in pricing across these markets. India's C-band auction, for example, was by far the most lucrative, raising over $10 billion, reflecting the high demand among operators in a competitive and densely populated market. Whereas in contrast, Malaysia's 2.6 gigahertz auction brought in just $8.5 million US, largely due to a different regulatory approach and a more collaborative model for 5G rollout involving a single wholesale network entity. And beyond these headline auctions, we're also seeing ongoing efforts to reform and reallocate spectrum in several markets, especially to support private networks, enterprise use cases, and future 5G standalone deployments. And looking ahead, we expect further activity in countries such as Malaysia, Hong Kong, Pakistan, and again India, with new auctions or rearranged allocations that I've confirmed or under serious discussion through 2025 and beyond. It's also worth mentioning that some countries are exploring shared or lightly licensed spectrum models, which could make spectrum more accessible for industrial and campus-based private networks. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I'll invite my colleague Ian Fogg to the floor for the Q&A session. So I had a few questions come through, Ian, if you're okay to have a go at these. So the first question is around fixed wireless access. We have seen that's gaining traction globally, but what does that look like in Asia Pacific? Do you have any sort of insight on that, or how fixed wireless access is globally as well?
So I think there are certain parts of the region where it's clearly much stronger than others. There's a lot of momentum in parts of Southeast Asia, in places like the Philippines, Malaysia. There's also traction happening now, sort of on the edge, and on the edge of the region in places like India, where the weakness in fixed infrastructure is leading to greater opportunities, fixed wireless access to serve the kind of the small business and residential broadband market.
Yeah, great, perfect. I think we're also seeing quite a lot of momentum for fixed wireless access in countries like Australia. Obviously, they're huge geographical areas, very rural populations outside of urban areas like Sydney, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of geographical drivers for fixed wireless access in Asia Pacific in particular, compared to Europe, for example, for sure. Okay, so there's a few more questions that we've got coming through. So for 5G standalone, Ian, do you expect it to accelerate faster in developing APAC markets compared to mature ones? How does that look to be moving over the next few years?
I think, as we've seen here, that the momentum around standalone, a lot of that has been very strong in key APAC markets like China, Japan, and Korea and other places. Typically, what we are now seeing is that leadership position that APAC markets have had around the switch to standalone, we're seeing momentum in other regions as well, where 5G operators deployed initially with non-standalone are now switching across to standalone. The other dynamic that we expect to see around standalone is that markets that maybe haven't deployed 5G yet, or maybe operators haven't, are likely to go directly to standalone. So if they're a late deployer of 5G, we see it quite likely that they will skip the NSA piece and go straight to standalone. I mean, there are some also interesting markets in APAC, like Singapore, where operators have switched off their non-standalone networks, which is, quite unusual globally. There are good reasons to do that in Singapore. That has actually meant, though, some of those early 5G devices that didn't have either standalone support or sufficient standalone support are not necessarily supported on those standalone networks. But that's another interesting dynamic in Singapore that is unusual globally.
Great, perfect. So I'm just reading through some of these. So we just had a question come through on satellite, and we do actually track satellite deployments in a report as well for the GSA. But the question is, what impact do you see LEO or low Earth orbit satellite deployments having on 5G rollouts? It's not made clear if that's looking at globally or in Asia Pacific, but what are your thoughts on that, Ian?
So I think there's a lot of dynamics around low Earth orbit satellite deployments, both in APAC and globally. We obviously have a number of services that are doing text messaging or emergency service messaging, both in APAC and globally. Apple has the Globalstar relationship, and there's obviously a lot of traction around new players like AST Space Mobile. There's traction around OneWeb, Starlink. Starlink has a number of relationships in APAC region and globally to do services. I think there's almost two different dynamics here. There is the fixed dynamic, which Starlink has got a leadership position of, but that's really about offering service where there's certainly in the APAC region where there's limited fixed network coverage and maybe limited cellular coverage. I think the direct-to-device piece, the smartphone piece, what we're seeing there is, or we will see the shift to standards-based offerings, where what 5G does is it gives you that bridge between the low Earth orbit, the NTN service, and the terrestrial cellular service. So the LEO becomes a complement to extend that 5G coverage further out. So essentially there will be a situation where anywhere a device can see the sky, there will be some level of coverage. And then there's obviously evolutions over time as the low Earth orbit satellite constellations get improved satellites, as they build up the constellations, we see new generation of satellites come in, which improves capacity. One of the other dynamics when you look at the direct device and fixed piece is it's obviously a lot more challenging to do a direct device service than it is to do a fixed offering, and simply because of the nature of a small battery power constrained device with small antennas versus a fixed installation where you can have a relatively large dish on the top of a building with mains power behind it. So there will be a difference in experience between the two. Hopefully that kind of covers a bit of that. If you've got follow-up questions, just on that LEO piece, just maybe drop us an email.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it looks like they've clarified they were looking at a global perspective as well. So that's I think hopefully answered that question really well. So there's some really good information in there. We've had a question on RedCap in particular around Asia Pacific, what that sort of picture looks like. And we do track RedCap, and that is something we've developed a report on, but we also track in our GAMLOG database if you are interested in that. But in terms of APAC, and obviously if you wanted to add to this as well, Ian, APAC, we are seeing activity for RedCap, in particular countries such as China. The three major operators there have already launched RedCap services. And in Australia as well, Telstra and Optus are currently testing RedCap technology. These tend to be markets that really lead on new mobile technologies, particularly Australia, as we've seen in this presentation. But we are also seeing activity for RedCap in India. Bharti Airtel are currently testing. Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines and Thailand, as well as, of course, South Korea, are all investing or have operators investing in 5G RedCap or 5G reduced capability. So there's definitely momentum for the technology in the region moving forward. But yeah, if you have anything to add to that, Ian, but hopefully that's a good overview for that.
I think that's a good summary. I think the other piece to understand here is that I think there's some perceptions that RedCap is largely like an IoT type technology. And we are seeing that. We are seeing that momentum around things like industrial modules and so forth. But there's also other offerings that we're seeing in the market. We're seeing FWA, CPE in the RedCap space, in some markets, again, particularly that Southeast Asia piece. There's also interest in some wearable devices like smartwatches. That's a bit more nascent, but there are a range of applications for RedCap coming through. You can see from some of the device makers.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, there's fixed wireless access. For example, Dito in the Philippines is very much focusing on RedCap for fixed wireless access. So yeah, there's a lot of different use cases. But yeah, obviously IoT is definitely the main focus for RedCap, or at least the main selling point for it at the moment.
And we had Ditto, I think, talking about some of that, I think, on a previous GSA webinar we had back in December, which is probably available in the archive.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, there is a 5G RedCap report if any viewers are interested in downloading that from the GSA website. Just looking at the time, it looks like we're over time at the moment. So I believe that will bring us to the end of the session. So I'll hand back to Richard to close out the session for us.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Ian, and thank you all for joining us today. We tried to get through as many questions as we could. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, then the team will endeavour to answer them directly via email after the event. After the event, you will receive a link to the full webinar recording. The report that lies behind all this data is available for download now from the GSA website. Again, a direct link to that will be shared with you immediately following this event. Access to all the data that Jordan and Ian have gone through today comes from the GSA's Gambot databases. As we said up top, all these databases are available to GSA members and associate organizations via the website. So if you're an employee of one of those organizations, you personally have access right away. If you'd like more information on how to get involved in GSA and access this data, then please do get in touch. You see the link there and a bit more details about the membership levels. For the latest updates on research and activities and events, if you follow us on the social channels, you'll get the updates on new reports and events when they're being organized. And similarly, you can sign up to our weekly research digest and monthly newsletter from the website. Next events through the end of the year, we'll cover topics like Latin America from a regional perspective. We'll have a look at private networks, at fixed wireless access, and at 5G experience. So again, lots of events taking us through to the end of the year. And with that, I'll just say thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our research team, and we hope to see you again at a future event. Many thanks.